So you know your stuff. As an engineer or scientist, you spend night and day building your solution. But when it's time to present, you freeze. The problem isn't just your knowledge, it's that your story isn't anchored in what decision makers care about, which is outcomes and systems. This is another episode of MoloMolo African Tech Stories. Let's go. Hi, I'm Dr. PK, and welcome to another episode of MoloMolo African Tech Stories. In today's episode, we are unpacking a powerful shift that can transform how you speak about your work, how KPIs and system thinking can unlock your technical confidence. In the previous episodes, we talked about the common misconceptions surrounding KPIs, key performance indicators. We emphasized how KPIs should not be viewed as a mere metric, but as tools to drive meaningful action and align with strategic objectives. We also advocated for a system thinking approach, highlighting the importance of context and adaptability in effectively utilizing KPIs. But before we go into examples, let's talk about system thinking. Now, this isn't new, right? It has roots between the 1950s and 60s, shaped by thinkers like J. Forrester, who pioneered system dynamics at MIT, Peter Senge, which is one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite books called The Fifth Discipline, that brought system thinking into the world of leadership and business. Amazing books. If you haven't read them, I would suggest you pick one. But they've all taught us something incredibly crucial, which is you can't change part of a system without changing the system. See, in short, everything is connected, right? When you understand how your technical work fits into that system and how it connects to KPIs, you start speaking the language of value and not just effort. Now, let's dive in why this matters and how maybe you can use it in your next presentation to your boss or to your colleague. So, reason number one why this is so important is that KPIs anchor you in outcomes, not just jargon. So, instead of saying the next time you present, or whatever your solution is. For example, you build a dashboard and you say, presentation, hey, I built a dashboard and this is its features, this is how long it took, and this is what it can do. And you give all the different features of what it can do. Rather emphasize on what the solution brings. For example, this dashboard reduced report generation time by 40%, and you show the results and how you got to that number and potentially also linking how it exceeds a specific KPI, which could be, repetitions down to 30%. Now, why does it matter? See, KPIs help translate technical work into impact. That's what decision makers want to hear, your boss or his superior. You need to tell a story. Tell a story about who you are and why this matters. Now, why do I say who you are? Because I remember a very interesting story in one of my previous jobs where one of the things that I needed to explain specifically was why there was a specific problem with the one of the control systems that I was designing. And I knew that my boss was pressed for time in at least getting the decision for him to go to his superior. And instead of boring him with, figures after figures after figures, and also realizing that one of the key performance indicators that as a senior engineer I need to have, which is being effective in trying to find a solution, I really condensed it to three simple lines. What the problem was, what was the ultimate choice in the solution, and the impact of that solution. And when you're able to give a three-liner, either through an email or a conversation, all of a sudden, not only does it give perspective of what you're talking about, but also gives perspective that you are aware of what matters. You're aware of of how you've been measured. You're aware of how you've been, what actually pays your salary at the end of the day, and that is crucial in any technical conversation that you can have. Now, did you know on May 31st, which is today, 2003, Air France retired its Concorde? Hmm. That's one of my favorite planes. Specifically, it is my son's Samson. That's his favorite plane by far. Unfortunately, in 2003, Air France ended supersonic passenger flight. The Concorde flew at just over Mach 2, which is, depending on altitude, is over 2,000 kilometers an hour. Imagine that. And carried up to 128 passengers. It was once recorded that it once linked Paris to Rio, Rio being in Brazil and Paris in France, and it actually did one of the earliest flights did a transit in Dakar, Senegal, which was, I'm sure, an amazing sight to see such an aircraft landing in Dakar. But the Concorde was such an amazing aircraft, hypothetically, a flight from Johannesburg to London, which of course it never flew, could have just taken 5 hours. Just imagine that, which is roughly half the time, if not slightly more half the time that it currently takes. It takes roughly between 9, 10, depending on the flight, 11 hours, which would have revolutionized African European travel. Unfortunately, its retirement closed a futuristic chapter in aviation history. Now it comes to mind, and this is of course this is a segue, and this is something to think about. Is cheaper air travel a more sustainable way of affecting African economies, traveled by poor road and railway networks? This is some kind of a question I have for myself, and it requires system thinking. It requires you thinking what are the key performance indicators for ensuring that an economy thrives. And one of the things that an economy needs to thrive is connection, is to connect from buyer to seller, business to business, department to department. And I mean, recently my sister went to see my parents in Bafoussam in Cameroon, and they even had a scare on the road because the driver lost control and just managed not to avoid a ravine. Crazy, crazy story. And but it is such a story is so often, it happens so often that it is almost normal. And that begs to question, would you want to do business and would you even want to invest and take out a loan and whatever the case may be to do a business in such conditions, in knowing that your business might completely lose its merchandise, or given the poor state of the road and given the poor network of railway lines. So, what about air travel? That's really what I'm thinking about. And I don't have an answer. I know that air travel is incredibly more expensive than producing a road, specifically when it comes to the road being capital expenditure on the once off, but the essential maintenance is a lot less as opposed to a train or a plane, which the maintenance costs essentially rise as you go on with years of service. I don't know. And of course, an airplane requires, specialized infrastructure to be able to operate, and it cannot operate at any touch point, which again is an advantage to rail and road. So I'm not sure. I'm just wondering, what do you think? Something to think about. But the point I'm making is that we should have these thoughts in our heads. And who knows, maybe one day the future might have little highly speed Concords over Bamako and Yaoundé and Dakar. Now, reason number two, systems thinking makes your story whole. So we're back to what we're talking about. Now, let's think about a logistics company. This company kept on missing delivery times. Clients are furious and they are calling every single day. Hey man, hey, yo, you guys are always late. My parcels are always arriving damaged. And I think it's your driver, and your driver is rude. And I know about all about drivers, right? Because delivery here in Germany is such a hit and miss. Depending on the day, depending on the time, if you stay on the second, third floor, some delivery companies drop it at the bottom of the step. Now, of course, this is Germany, or at least Munich, specifically Gilching. The probability of your parcel being stolen is, close to none. I've never had a parcel being stolen in 5 years, which is crazy. But so they take advantage of that. So they've dropped your parcel. They don't even ring. They just, as long as they get into the building, they just drop it on the first floor and then poof, vanished. You just come back and you're like, oh, there's my parcel. Um, Now, of course, they take advantage of that. But imagine if it's late, or imagine it never arrives, or imagine it becomes damaged. That is a big deal. Now, imagine just immediately blaming the driver because that's your point of contact. Um, you see, system thinking tells us that we need to model what's going on. We need to go to the root cause of what's going on. And that's something what we call a systems model. Because a systems model is able to, model the start to finish, from the warehouse to the delivery, what was happening. And in this particular case, it was found out that within the logistics framework of that company, that in actual fact the real problem was actually the slow warehouse checks that put pressure on everybody else to deliver this parcel on time. The guys were essentially triple checking or double checking, or the system was offline, or essentially the whole incoming receivables was really poorly managed, or non-conformant, because the procedure was potentially too non yeah, just not the right procedure to do to get the right target. Now, why does it matter? Why does it matter? See, system thinking gives you the why behind the what happened, right? And that depth gives you presence and gives you authority. It enables you to step back and say, I know this is what I'm delivering. I know this is what I've been asked of me, but this solution, where does it within the system that I'm part of, within the workplace that I'm part of, what is its overall impact? What is its overall place within the system? And not so much just a placeholder, but what is its impact if it's not there? And oftentimes that information is missing for a lot of corporate. And I know that's one of the things I always fought, not fought, but really, kind of pushed back with my previous boss was, engineers and technical people, the only way for them to feel engaged is if they have the full picture. If they understand what what am I doing? Why am I here? What what is the big goal? Right? Because a good engineer is an engineer that understands systems. A good engineer is an engineer that thrives within a system. And you take that away by only giving piecemeal information, you essentially take away his ability to come up with an innovative idea that exists within a system. And unfortunately, that also brings a certain level of confidence knock because you don't have the full picture. So it is a system in itself to have the correct information for you to speak with authority, but also for you to have presence when you're talking about your technical results. So reason number three, and this is probably one of the biggest one. See, together, system thinking and KPIs help you own the room when you combine them together. You stop sounding like someone in the weeds, kind of floating all over the place, and you start sounding like someone who sees the whole map. And as I was saying, it's whether it's a product, It really is, whether it's a service, whether it's a stakeholder meeting, understanding outcomes that comes from a system is understanding that you are the direct beneficiary, but also the direct contributor to whether those two specific outcomes actually are in your favor. Now, unfortunately, oftentimes you're not aware of it, and you're not aware of it oftentimes in no fault of your own. You are within a culture that is not transparent. You are within a business. Your business is dealing with clients who are not transparent. Your methods do not ask the right question for the system to become transparent. And the outcomes that you should measure against are essentially devoid of data and devoid of actual insight. And that can be hard to move forward. That can be hard to sound credible. That can be hard to be clear and confident. And that's where you need to take a step back. You need to step back to say to yourself, what questions and what outcomes am I looking for in order for me to understand the system that I'm in and the outcomes that can be measured and are of value from the system? And once you're able to kind of dig away, right? And oftentimes it's got a lot to do with you asking different people within your team, your clients for feedback. It's got a lot to do with asking your colleagues for feedback, or even your boss for feedback. You start realizing that the system potentially is not as what you thought. It's not as what you originally wanted it to be. And that leads me to, just overall business. As you know, some of you know, I've been doing business now for the past few months, going towards the, self-employment, entrepreneurship, scary stuff, to be honest. But I appreciate the fact that I've made a conscious decision to offer, a system-based approach to technical solutions and, building workflows. Because system based not only is about delivering a high quality result, which, thinks of the life cycle of the solution, from deployment, from conception to deployment, but it also forces me to be aware of where I fit in into the system. Why is that important? Because oftentimes, as a consultant, as a technical professional, you can almost think that you are almost divorced from the solution. You are almost like the puppet master, and this little, puppet is just dancing, and you forget that the perception of the puppet has got everything to do with the puppet master. And as soon as you realize that it's not just the puppet that you're selling yourself. You are within that system. Your solution is you. You have put your imprint on the solution, and you need to be part of the solution. So it's not just a matter of doing the best technical work as possible. In actual fact, I'm starting to realize what is more important is for me to explain why this system matters. Why me, you, the client, whoever else is a stakeholder, why the system matters. And the storytelling is completely different because I am part of the system. I am invested in the solution. Not necessarily that I want to use it, but I want to make the person understand that this system involves me. And because it involves me, I've decided to take this path in giving you the solution. It's a completely different mindset shift because the outcome then is not divorced from what you're doing, it's not divorced from who you are. It's actual fact completely related to you as a person. Then all of a sudden, here's the kicker. Then all of a sudden, because you're part of the solution and because the solution has got your imprint, then you want you give the best imprint as possible, which forces you to learn, forces you to be self-aware, forces you to grow in your ability to connect with people, in your ability to grow with your customer, your ability to be empathetic to their issues and not necessarily just be technically driven because you're a technical professional. I hope that makes sense because that is for me such an aha thing that have happened that is happening essentially with how I'm approaching this consultancy is to basically put in the middle the connection, the empowerment. I mean, that's essentially kind of the motto of MoloMolo is empowering through conversation, empowering through discussion, empowering through raw, honest truths, but also empowering through human-centric solutions that imprint the engineer or the technical person within that solution for the sake of teaching, for the sake of self-awareness, and for the sake of sustainable solution that is human-centric. So, at MoloMolo Tech Studios, we do believe that technical confidence isn't about knowing everything, right? But it's about understanding your impact in the system. KPI gives you why it matters. System thinking gives you how it works and how and what and how you play a part in it. So together, you become the person who doesn't just present data, but you actually start leading with insight. So, if you want to boost your technical storytelling, you can book a 45-minute coaching session where we will help you to translate some workflows into an automated system-based using system-based technology and into a compelling system story. So just follow us for more or see the link in the description that comes with this podcast or this video and we'll be able to connect. Thank you again for watching. This was another episode of MoloMolo African Tech Stories. I am Dr. PK. Until next time, ciao.